Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be going over my updated builds for the Burst Pistol. I haven't talked about the Burst Pistol in a while either, and it's a super fun weapon to use. I'm going to be going over the builds that I use without overclocks. First up will be a general purpose build, and then it will be more of a damage oriented build. So in tier 1 we have extra damage, better spread, and less spread overall. And we also have blow through rounds that can punch through one enemy. Out of these ones, for my general purpose build, I usually go with the floating barrel and have more accuracy. The damage is nice too. Even the blow through rounds can be pretty good as well. But for me personally, I like the reduced spread. That makes it so the pattern is very tight with the burst pistol, and I can use it at pretty long ranges pretty effectively. Tier 2, we have less recoil, faster reload speed, and then improved rate of fire. For this one, for my general purpose build, I usually go with the faster reload speed. The burst pistol already reloads fairly quick at 2.2 seconds. Knocking it down to 1.5 seconds is really nice though. I do like the minimal downtime with it. In tier 3, we have high capacity magazines, increasing our magazine size by 12. Or we have increased damage, increasing our damage by 3. Usually I go with the increased damage here. I just kind of like it a little bit more than the increased magazine size, but the magazine size is great too. This one I really feel is like personal preference. Just pick whichever one you like more. I like the little bit more damage, but I know plenty of people like the little more magazine size. In tier 4, we have armor breaking, maximum ammo, and increased weak spot damage. This one I will either go with increased weak spot damage or with increased ammo, depending on what I think I need. Depends on what my primary is. If I have a bunch of bullets with the primary, I will usually go with hollow point rounds. If I don't, then I'll usually go with more ammo. The hollow point rounds are just really nice. Having that extra 40% damage to weak spots does make it so the burst pistol can hit really hard. Especially against large enemies where it's pretty easy to hit their weak spot multiple times. And then in tier 5 we have stun. This makes it so enemies are stunned for 4 seconds if we hit them with all 3 shots within this burst. Or we have a longer burst which gives us 3 more bullets, so that we go from burst firing 3 shots to burst firing 6 shots. I usually go with the stun here. I'm fine with the 3-round burst. I think we have enough damage to kill most enemies, and this way we're not using extra ammo. It feels real awkward to be using the long burst on certain enemies, like if there's a bunch of crawlers and maybe you only hit 1 or 2 of them. So this is my general purpose build that I use with the burst pistol. If I want a damage build, then I will usually go with extra damage in tier 1. In tier 2, it's your choice. Any of these are fine. I'll still usually go with the reload speed, but sometimes I'll go with the increased rate of fire so that we can shoot out a little bit quicker, but reload speed's pretty great too. Increased damage in tier 3, increased weak spot damage in tier 4, and then longer burst in tier 5. This is just so that I can keep firing at big things and hopefully hit their weak spot with all 6 bullets. That's pretty much all I'm going for with this particular build. And with this one, I usually pair it with a weapon that has a lot of bullets, or I'm running a build that has a lot of bullets, so I'm running like full ammo autocannon, or I'm running full ammo minigun. Now let's talk about the overclocks. Usually I have footage playing above of the overclocks if they're really different from what the base gun is, but the burst pistol is one of those rare exceptions where the overclocks don't really feel all that different than the base version of the pistol. It's usually just tweaking different values. Now, yes, some of these do feel quite a bit different, like lead spray, where your pattern is just way bigger, so you're going to be far less accurate. And electro minelets does have its own unique ability of putting down the electro minelets, but they're not that much different than the regular bullets. And if you've seen like the cryo minelets, they look the same as that, where they just are a little blue blob on the ground. Aside from that, all the rest of these don't really feel that much different than using the burst pistol, at least just shooting it at any regular enemy. They are going to feel different in terms of the values and how hard they hit, but that's going to be more something that you notice when you're actually playing it, more so than you're going to see it in any sort of like footage. First up, we have composite casings. This gives us increased ammo, increased rate of fire. This one's great. I really like this one. The way that I usually build this is pretty much my general purpose setup, so it'd be something similar to this, like what I like to run. That's a pretty good setup. You could go with extra ammo here too and have a whole bunch of extra bullets. That feels really nice to run with this as well. You can run this however you'd like though, like a lot of clean overclocks, especially this one, it just feels really good. Extra bullets and extra rate of fire with no downside. Then we have a not as fantastic clean overclock, which is full chamber seal. This one gives us a slightly faster reload by 0.2 seconds and gives us 1 more point of damage. Neither of those stats really matter. Mostly the reload speed feels kind of nice, especially if you pair it with the extra reload speed in tier 2, because then we're down to 1.3 seconds. So we do have a really quick reload. Aside from that though, this feels pretty much like the base burst pistol, and I really think that this overclock should be changed a little bit. Again, you can run the same kind of general purpose build that I usually run, and that's what I usually take with this. I think that one works pretty well. So let's move on to the more exciting overclocks with compact mags. This gives us 84 more ammo, lowers our rate of fire, and increases our reload speed. The increase in reload speed is pretty noticeable. You do feel a little bit more sluggish when reloading the gun. The loss in rate of fire is also noticeable. For this one, I usually go with the floating barrel in tier 1 so that I have more accuracy, but again, these other options are really great too. In tier 2, I go with the disabled safety, and I'm more okay with trading off the rate of fire over the reload speed. Because if we take the reload speed, we are reloading a little bit quicker than we normally would, but that rate of fire feels kind of sluggish to me, so I don't really care for it that much, so I'm going to go with the disabled safety. If it doesn't bother you, then the reload speed is pretty good too. And then once again, I usually go with increased caliber rounds. Sometimes I like going expanded ammo bags here just because then we have a ton of bullets. We have 300 total ammo, and then I go with the burst stun. If you want more damage, go with the longer bursts. That works too. Then we have experimental rounds. This gives us 9 more direct damage. However, we lose out on 6 magazine size and 30 total ammo. There's a couple different ways you can build this. If you can actually build it to where you can one burst grunts to the body, so long as you hit all 3 shots to the body. And that is going with extra damage here, armor breaking in tier 4. Anything in tier 2, it's your choice. So if you want faster reload speed, faster rate of fire, recoil, whatever it might be, you can take all of this, and we can actually just use the multiplier here to see how much damage we're doing. And we're doing 108 damage, which is exactly enough damage to kill a grunt on any difficulty, so long as you hit all 3 shots to the body. So with this particular build, you can one-shot body shot, well, you're not really one-shotting, you're 3-shot body shotting a grunt from the burst of it, which is okay. I've ran this one before, but I find myself running through bullets really quick with it, and honestly, it's not really my favorite setup to run. The extra damage in tier 1, any of these in tier 2, whichever one you like the most. Usually I go with the quick fire ejector just because I like the faster reload speed, but any of them are fine. Extra damage in tier 3, extra bullets in tier 4. It's really hard to pass up these other 2 in tier 4, and they aren't bad options because if you go with the armor breaking, like I said, you can one burst grunts to the body. If you go with extra ammo, you're not running through bullets as fast. You can kill big stuff pretty quick. You can still kill grunts with 2 body shots and 1 headshot, so if you do manage to hit at least 1 in the face and the other 2 make contact in the body, you will still kill it. And then I usually go with the burst stun. You don't really need the longer bursts here. That you're probably going to run through bullets really quick then if you take that. So I find the stun to be pretty useful, especially if I just want to hit a Praetorian. And then just keep smacking it with either this or my primary weapon. Alright, then we move on to our unstable overclocks, and first up is electromindlets. Electromindlets makes it so any bullet that impacts the terrain is then converted into an electromindlet that takes a little time to arm. Once an enemy steps near it or on top of it, it explodes, dealing damage to them and all enemies around them, and applying the electric status effect, which deals damage over time and slows all enemies that get hit by it. For this, we lose out on direct damage and we lose out on magazine size. This one is really good for crowd control, so if you're going with a high damage single target primary weapon, it can be really strong. If you want to go with like jet fuel homebrew for the Hurricane, if you want to go with Big Bertha for the autocannon, or potentially Lead Storm too for the minigun, then this one's a great secondary to have because it will slow down enemies. It's pretty good for crowd control. The loss in magazine size is not that big of a deal, nor is the loss in damage, because every time that you have any enemy step across these electromindlets, then they will be doing a pretty good amount of damage per second. So for this one, I go with the blow-through rounds in tier 1. This is so that you can punch through enemies, so the bullet actually will hit the enemy, deal damage to him, and then hit the ground, set itself up as a mine, and then hopefully electrocute that enemy or electrocute nearby enemies. I find that this gets you a lot more value with this particular overclock than it does with any of the other ones. In tier 2, you can pick any of these. These are all great options. I love the faster reload speed, but if you like the increased rate of fire or you like the recoil, take those ones. Whatever you want, just take that. In tier 3, you can make up for the magazine size or you can make up for the damage. Both of these are pretty good options. Usually I opt for the damage because I'm okay with the 12 rounds in the pistol. If you find that to be not enough ammo, then go with the magazine size. That one's a good option too. I just like having the increased caliber rounds so that if I do need to just spray something in the face, I can do it and kill stuff a little bit quicker than I would. And it might make more sense if you're going with one of these other 2 options in tier 2 to go with the high capacity magazine, because one of the reasons why I can kind of deal with the smaller magazine is that I can reload it pretty fast. In tier 4, I usually go with expanded ammo bags so that I can get more bullets. I'm usually just trying to punch through enemies with the blow-through rounds and then set up more minelets, so the more ammo makes more sense to me than necessarily armor breaking or the weak spot damage. The weak spot damage would be a good buff though too. And then I go with the burst stun. If you can stun enemies with all 3 rounds and then have all 3 rounds underneath them also shocking them, you can kill them a bit quicker, so it kind of makes sense to set up with that. If you just want to spray out more mines, then you can set up the longer burst though too. Alright, then our next overclock is micro flechettes. Micro flechettes is a pretty fun overclock too. Increases our magazine size by 30, doubles our maximum ammo, halves our spread, and halves our recoil. So our gun becomes incredibly accurate and we get a ton of extra shots. The downside to it though is that we lose 11 damage in total, so we're only up to 10 damage. That does make our weapon feel quite a bit weaker. So for me, I usually build this 2 different ways depending on what I want. Either as a status effect build or as a burst damage build. With all of this extra bullets, it could be tempting to go with extra ammo here, and that is a pretty fun option to go. You have 450-ish rounds, at least if you take this, you have something like 450 rounds, and that is pretty awesome to have. It's not entirely necessary though, so I wouldn't recommend going with a floating barrel in tier 1. You don't need the extra accuracy, your gun is already pretty accurate with this overclock, so this isn't as useful as it could be. Blow through rounds or the high velocity rounds make a lot more sense. Usually I go with the high velocity rounds. Tier 2, you probably don't want to go with the recoil because we already have reduced recoil. Take one of the other 2 options. I like the disabled safety for this one so that we can shoot out our shots a little bit faster. In tier 3, I like going with the increased damage as well. You could go with the increased magazine size and have 66 rounds in your gun. That's pretty fun too, but I find that 54 rounds is usually fine. And then in tier 4, armor breaking is pretty good on this. Extra ammo is fun, but I don't think it's necessary. And then the hollow point rounds do the most amount of damage, and usually that's what I take because I'm aiming for the weak spots. If you just find yourself spraying at enemies and you want to hit through multiple crowds of grunts or something, you could go with blow through rounds and armor breaking. That's a pretty good combination. But if you're trying to hit things in the weak spot, then I usually go with extra damage and the hollow point rounds. And then I'll usually go with the longer burst unless I want this for stunning enemies, because it can be pretty useful as a crowd control option to be stunning specific enemies. If you're stunning like Praetorians so they can't spit, or acid spitters, web spitters, any of the Mac Terra, stuns are very useful against them, and this is really good in a team setting. Other than that, I usually like going with the longer burst though. This way I can fire out 6 rounds and potentially kill quite a few enemies. It's also pretty good if you take this combination as well and try to punch through multiple crowds to hit a bunch of enemies behind them. I've had fairly good success with this build as well. And then our last overclock is lead spray. This increases our direct damage, but increases our base spread. So we are far less accurate, but we get a whole lot more damage. Now we're doing 31.5 damage per shot. For this one, I like to build all damage for it. So I usually go with extra damage in tier 1, extra damage in tier 2. In tier 3, really any of these are fine. The disabled safety makes it so you can spray out these bullets even quicker. You could also go with longer burst if you want and have 6 rounds. This is really strong against dreadnoughts. You can just get right up next to them and completely shred them. You can also do the same thing with oppressors or anything large. The main downside to this overclock, and just kind of this build style in general, is that it's really bad at enemies that are further away than medium range. Even at medium range, sometimes this can struggle because it's just so inconsistent. Longer ranges, it can definitely struggle. And against flying enemies, it can be really inconsistent to be hitting them. Same with anything on the ceiling. That being said, if you do hit something though, you're probably going to kill it very quick. So those are my builds for the burst pistol and all of its overclocks. I hope this kind of helped you out. I hope that the lack of footage didn't upset anybody or anything like that. I will be doing more footage things when we go over Scout's weapons again. So we're going to be going over like the GK2 and kind of the updated builds for that, and M1000 and all those fun weapons. Thanks for watching this. I really do appreciate it. And special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this. And if you would like to be a part of that, you can. There are links down in the description. Thanks everybody who does that. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.